Hello ratbags, it's Jade. Welcome to the annual ARK Survival Evolved vs Conan Exiles video. Yes, every year I pretty much run down how both of these games have been performing and what you can look forward to in the upcoming future. This is not a video to discuss which one is better overall. They've both been going a number of years, they've both got plus points and negatives. This is more just about recapping how the year has gone for them in 2020, but also what to look forward to in 2021. This will be the 4th edition I've done, so let's go! ARK vs Conan 2021. So as always, I do recap exactly what's been going on for both of these games over the last year, and 2020 was a difficult year with COVID-19 hitting around the world. So many games companies struggle to get content out or release their brand new products. So don't really want to be too harsh in terms of what they managed to achieve or not, but based on their history as well, I think it's important to recognise that lots of game companies still managed to release DLC and launch their brand new games this year. There was over 5 brand new survival games on Xbox and PlayStation in 2020, all throughout the COVID period, and many games still managed to successfully launch brand new updates and DLC. So how well did ARK and Conan do? Well, let's take a look at ARK first. Crikey, it seems like a lifetime ago, but in February ARK launched Gen 1, part 1 of their 2 DLC season pass, the Genesis season content. Part 2 is coming in March, very soon, 2021, but this was the first part of it, and it was a bit polarising. They had some good ideas, adding missions for the very first time to ARK Survival Evolved, where HLNA would guide you through various different activities. Sometimes they would be races, other times you'd be looking for certain dinosaurs, or just simply going around killing certain creatures. They added a lot of variety, but there were problems with it, and Gen 1 ended up being one of the worst rated DLCs out of the lot. On Steam right now, only 52% of the people that have bought this DLC have rated it positive. 65% rated the previous one Extinction, and before that you have to go all the way back to Aberration to get a mostly positive score. People liked the biomes, I did too. I thought they were great, they're fantastic looking, but some of them were a little bit cut and recycled from previous maps, so that's what it felt like. And the decision to teleport between biomes instead of actually having it as just one big map really backfired, with lots of technical problems, particularly on the Xbox and PS4 as standard nowadays. It really was a bit of a letdown that Gen 1 quickly became an old thing. As usual though, the creatures they added were fantastic, with the Ferox and the Bog Spider being really standout unique creatures, and there was a bunch of stuff to go and do in terms of completing the storyline, which really opened up new aspects for the future. But with so many technical problems, again mostly on Xbox and PlayStation, this DLC definitely hasn't been received as well as maybe the devs had hoped, and they've made big changes promised for the next one that's coming. No more broken up maps, it's all going to be just one big experience, and the missions that will take place in separate areas rather than getting interrupted by other players or just random events and creatures. There were a whole host of balance issues with this DLC. As always, it gets updated with quality of life features for the rest of the game, and it affected massive parts of it. Lots of other maps weren't working correctly, lots of creatures were invisible or not spawning, and it took them far too long to fix it. On Xbox and PlayStation particularly, it was 3 months before they fixed the majority of the problems that PC had fixed over 2 months before then. So all in all, not a great start for ARK Survival Evolved, one of the worst rated DLCs to date. Yet somehow it was one of the most bought. The Genesis Season Pass has been one of the most popular DLCs, and it did catapult ARK's player base in terms of people playing it massively higher once more. But personally for me, overall a massive letdown. Not content with ARK being available on Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, mobile and of course Steam, Wildcard officially launched it on the Epic Games Store, and in conjunction with that they launched the Crystal Isles map. A fan favourite for a number of years, this spectacular unique biomes were finally added as a proper official DLC. And the best thing of all, of course, was it was free. This was one of 2 major content drops for ARK in 2020. Launching in June on PC, it took 2.5 months before it arrived on Xbox and PlayStation, but the hype around it had built up and it was a fantastic addition. ARK also went and added some brand new creatures, not just one, but actually 3 or 4 different ones when you take into account variants. They added the Crystal Wyverns, a unique type of wyvern, as well as of course the Tropio, a special kind of Tyrannosaur family creature that you could put a jetpack on. Now, despite this being a fan favourite and one of the very first early modded maps that really got popular, this actually maybe didn't get rated as highly as a lot of people would thought. People's favourite map is still Ragnarok, and I would say that Valguero has still received a bit of a more positive reception. But for sure, the Crystal Isles do add a bunch of new gameplay elements as well, with lots of resources, extra ones or reskins that really make it a little bit more different than some of the other maps we've had for free in the past. Long continuing the tradition of having a free map almost every year, ARK have done a really good job of this. Despite the problems with COVID, they still managed to get this out, even if it was a bit late when it did arrive on the Xbox and PlayStation. Of course, more technical problems were there. As ever, Xbox and PlayStation had huge issues, and again, it did take quite a while to fix them. ARK, of course, celebrated its 5th birthday as well, so there was big celebrations to be had, with this event especially being pretty popular, and again highlighting Wildcard's attempts at giving proper seasonal content, whether it's Halloween updates, Easter content or Thanksgiving. Wildcard do try and give fans and the players lots of content all throughout the year for free. So in a year hit hard by the COVID, as I mentioned, it was going to be a bit light for content for lots of games, and it took until November for Wildcard to produce some more content in the form of TLC free. Yearly they're meant to really do this, but it's actually been over 2 years since the last one, where they revamped some of the creatures, add some new quality of life features and mix up some of the meta. Now, unlike a lot of the TLCs in the past, they only actually revamped 2 of the creatures, maybe 3 if you include the Giga some changes, but it was the Mammoth and the Stegosaurus that got the most love, with brand new attacks and new ways to utilise them. They also added breedable insects. Before now you've not been able to breed spiders or praying mantis and stuff like that. Well, that's all changed. You can now breed to heart's content some of the weirdest and creepiest crawlies. They also added a taming bar to the game to make everything just a little bit easier, and this was definitely a welcome addition. So lots of other quality of life stuff, but it took them far too long to add this, and definitely I would say this is the kind of stuff I'd like to see added more regularly, at least 2 times a year. And that was it for 2020. 2 major pieces of free content in TLC free, and of course the Crystal Isles, and the first part of the paid DLC, Gen 1, back in February. As I mentioned earlier, Wildcard did have a bunch of events, although some of them ended up being quite muted, with only just maybe adding some extra skins or different colours for players to go and get for their dinosaurs, rather than some of the bigger, more challenging stuff they've added. But then again, some of the updates they had to seasonal were working pretty well, and they did add new things to do, like try and summon a Dodo Rex once more. But once again, just like every single one of these videos I've done, each and every one of these events somehow managed to break and cock up the game for the majority of players on Xbox and PlayStation, with a lot of downtime and a lot of re-updates or hotfixes. ARK had over 90 updates for the PS4 in 2020. The majority of them are server side, so you wouldn't have even noticed, as it takes place on official servers or unofficial servers only. But for players who actually only play on their single player worlds, you still had 12 major updates, as I said, with 2 of them being free content drops. Despite the challenges and despite the delays, as well as the broken stuff with the updates, I would say it was definitely a better year for ARK in 2020 than 2019. As back then there wasn't any paid DLC that year, and there was only 1 free map really adding content. A few key things to note why ARK has been so popular still in 2020 as well. It did go free to play for a week when it was in the Epic Games Store, and it has had its DLC, the Extinction, Scorched Earth and Aberration DLC packs, go as part of the Games Pass free content recently. So that has all helped build towards ARK, which continues to be free on the Games Pass as well. Continue its player base, which is strong on Xbox, PlayStation, and obviously smashing records on Steam, where it's had multiple sales that have injected new players into the game. Now let's take a look at Conan in 2020. They really had problems in 2020. They bigged it up at the end of 2019 with their mounts update hitting one of their highest player counts for years, and then they spoke about DLC in a financial quarters meeting where they said that there was being DLC coming and a brand new map. Now the reveal of this info was probably a huge mistake, as it built up quite a lot of hype, and Funcom really didn't take steps to really give outlines of exactly when we could expect some of this stuff. They were also overtaken or bought out by Tencent completely, and they are now a Tencent owned company. And I do believe this has had an effect, although there were problems starting to creep in before the purchase had fully gone through. When it comes to updates, it's a tale of two cities, or two systems at least. PC has received a number of updates, specifically towards the end of the year, that really improved and changed and mixed up the meta, whereas Xbox and PlayStation only really received 3 major updates. These were all based on the follower system, how to have your followers basically follow you more, do lots of things for you, take directions, and be just a little bit more useful. This kick-started in March and they ended up doing the final one in August. As good as some of this content was, a lot of it I really did feel like it was just quality of life rather than adding full big content to the game. I gave Conan Exiles the best game versus ARK in 2019 simply because they had the most free content, updating the game regularly with dungeons, new things to explore, new ways to play the game, and they did that every quarter more or less, as well as produce paid DLC. But in 2020 things just went massively wrong for them. Their port teams that they employed to do the Xbox and PlayStation versions, they simply couldn't work during the COVID situation, and it meant many updates that were due for console took far too long to arrive. Also, to compound this, Xbox and PlayStation hadn't had avatars, the big giant creatures that you can use to summon to take on other players and destroy their bases. They'd been missing for nearly a year on console. Problems crept in towards the end of 2019, they cut them off and said they would work on them and reintroduce them in the future, but it took them nearly 10 months to do so. At the very least, it may be even longer than that. Now this was a big component of the game. This is like the end game meta. Getting avatars to destroy others is what you live for when you play PvP Conan Exiles. So when you compare it, even though they had more updates than ARK, I would say ARK Survival Evolved absolutely wins in terms of free content and keeping the game going for players in 2020. Their numbers on Steam, or at least on PC, might have increased a little bit if they'd gone through also with their plans to offer Conan as free on the Epic Games Store, which they still haven't launched on. Mysteriously, a week before it was meant to happen, a week before it was meant to be the free-to-play game, it was pulled and it hasn't appeared on the Epic Games Store since. They also announced that when it does come out eventually, it won't actually be free to play. This generated a huge amount of interest in ARK, even though that game was years old and available on Steam for ages. These types of promos can really help the game, and particularly with Conan, it helped massively for the PlayStation crowd. Now, paid content, Conan did do a little bit better, but not much. They had their Architects of Argos pack, which came out in May, and this was another cosmetic style skin pack that you can buy for around $7.99, $8.99. So it's pretty cheap, and it does give you brand new build pieces, which is extremely popular in Conan Exiles. There are lots of players that play just single player or PvE, and so having content like this is really a big deal to them. I would say though, it felt much like a rushed bit of reskinning. It was kind of odd, it wasn't part of any season pass like they had previously, and it's the lone piece of DLC they had that came out for Xbox, PlayStation and PC in 2020. Overall, it's quite surprising Funcom didn't try taking advantage of more players being at home playing games, because they've previously had lots of these packs come out all throughout the year, as I said, as part of season content that you buy and get a discount. And as I said, they're really popular. In fact, so popular that in 2019, despite them offering Conan for free on the PlayStation Plus benefits program, they still had one of their record years because so many people bought some of these cosmetic packs. But I guess this is where things really start to affect them, not having certain teams in certain countries able to reproduce the content quickly or get it ready for Xbox and PlayStation at the same time. Now, you might have thought I made a mistake when I said there was only one DLC added, but of course I was talking about Xbox and PlayStation. The Isle of Siptah is their big expansion. This is the future of Conan Exiles, and it's going to remain that way for 2021, but of course it only launched on PC. I can't express how badly Funcom messed up this launch with this DLC. For months and months they had an opportunity to talk about whether or not it would appear on Xbox or PlayStation. Instead they waited until the very last minute. I was given early access to this game mode and DLC, but I couldn't really do much because most of you guys that watch are console fans. The actual DLC itself was just kind of meh. Launched in early access, which was quite surprising considering the game is so established. I guess with some of the problems they've had, they felt they had to do it this way. Now this DLC isn't cheap. For what it was, even though it was early access, I would say it's still pretty expensive, and so it does mean that once it does hit full price, it will be a considerable amount. So I'm expecting a lot more from this than I maybe would their skin packs. But overall, it was nice to finally have something new to explore. The Conan Exiles map has become pretty stale and old. Unlike ARK, they've never really had an opportunity to provide new areas to explore, and this is the first big attempt. And there are some good points, but there are a lot of bads. There's lots of new dungeons to go and explore, take part in, with lots and lots of brand new enemies added, but lots of them are reskins with no real new animations or new attacks. The obligatory brand new build piece set, which has you kind of making your own pirate shantytown, is pretty cool, but again there's lots and lots of issues with some of the placeables and stuff that came with this. A lack of armour, a lack of weapons, it really did feel like it was pretty light. So maybe they're going to obviously add a lot more, and they've got big plans, as I said, for 2021, which we'll go over. But definitely the creatures that come as part of the storm, the new way of playing of getting thralls that you have to go and get from these surges or storms that appear on the island, seemed intriguing. But what it did lead to was a massive grind, and players not being able to transfer their characters over from their original exiled lands really made this quite a chore for players. And although it gave the Conan Exiles player base on Steam its biggest jump in years, it was still pretty small compared to some of their competitors around them. So overall, it was great that Funcom were trying some new stuff with, as I said, the way that you can get thralls and trying a brand new map experience. But already they're dialing it back and they're starting to think about making it more like the Exiled Lands experience you've come to know. And of course, since it was in early access and because of the problems they've had getting port jobs done, it didn't launch on Xbox and PlayStation at the same time. And in fact, we still don't have a release date other than some vague early 2021 release. And it's just quite frankly not good enough. I really am disappointed in Funcom. Over the year, I felt like their communication really lacked. They didn't keep up with streams that they were doing, which made them so good in 2019. It seems they had a lot of behind the scene changes. Whether or not that was brought upon by the Tencent takeover, I don't think so, as Tencent generally leave their companies to get on with it. But no doubt about it, for console fans, not having any real big content since the year before, literally in December, this was a bit of a kick in the teeth, especially as there are more players playing console than there probably are on Steam right now. Going free to play on the PlayStation Plus was huge for Conan, and it really rescued it from just being a mediocre game and putting it out there for so many players. But there we go, that was 2020 for Funcom and Conan. Overall, both companies struggled in 2020 with COVID-19 hitting things, but Wildcard did manage to rescue it and get their content out for all of their player base, unless we're talking about Switch, which hasn't had an update in 2 years. While Wildcard still struggled at times with communication, they still really kept a lot of their player base engaged, and they still managed to beat record numbers, hitting 157,000 players on Steam, the biggest amount they've ever had, absolutely dominating the survival space. Only until recently has that been bettered by the huge resurgence in Rust. And it really shows the lack of content, the lack of free updates or even paid content for Conan Exiles really has kept their player base low when so many games did so well during lockdown. With the brand new DLC launching, you would expect their numbers to maintain a bigger player base, but they're already slipping back down to what it was before the DLC launched. So in terms of most supported and the best one that you'll get content for, I would say ARK was the best bet in 2020. But what about 2021? What's the future for both of these games? Well, of course, ARK is going to dominate once more early on as Gen 2, the final DLC for ARK Survival Evolved 1, launches in March. This promises to be a unique experience, with Rockwell being voiced by David Tennant, otherwise known as Doctor Who, and a bunch of other bad guys in history of TV. We now know we're on a special sort of colony ship that's heading for somewhere, and we're maybe going to be taming brand new creatures with brand new armor sets, whole new weapons, and it does look pretty exciting. As ever, these trailers are always fantastic looking. They generate the hype, and it's going to be interesting to see how the changes have gone from Gen 1 to Gen 2. A complete whole map, no zones that you're spawning in, and a heavy influence, I would say, from Horizon Zero Dawn and Halo. Suck it, anyone that disagrees. The big question will be whether or not this DLC is going to have the problems that console had. They delayed this. It was meant to come out before the end of the year of 2020, but they delayed it another 3 months until March. I won't put any money on it not being delayed again. I fully expect to see it actually come out in April, but we'll have to wait and see. But for sure, the Night Strider, whatever this guy's called, is looking fantastic. I can't wait to jump on him and see how it goes turning invisible as I jump on other players. The biomes look unique, they look really cool, and being able to go and mess around with more space dolphins, as well as a heavy Cthulhu influence with loads of space jellyfish eyeballs and loads of tentacles from Rockwell. As far as the rest of the year goes, that might actually be it. They are starting to wind down because they want to start building the hype for their next big adventure, which will be, of course, ARK 2, officially announced as part of the Game Awards in December. We know it's coming, and yes, it does star Vin Diesel, but we'll get to that in a minute. I've seen some conjecture say we might get another free map this year. I really don't think so. The devs have said they really want to make progress a step between ARK and ARK 2 so that you really know it's a different game. You're not taking your dinosaurs and creatures over with you to the next version of the next game, and so they want to leave some space. That would be the right idea. If they carry on supporting ARK 1, then people might not necessarily want to move over to ARK 2. And while this doesn't necessarily mean they're going to cut off support straight away, of course not. They'll keep the servers running for ARK 1, and I'm sure they'll carry on trying to do seasonal events and such like. But the idea that we're going to get 3 brand new maps like we've had, I just think it's going to be very much a smaller case. We will get updates and fixes, but there wasn't going to be a huge amount of attention put into ARK 1 anymore, since ARK 2 is going to be coming in 2022. As usual, the usual clickbaiters are talking about some free map being made official when it turns out it's just a modded map that's gaining some attention. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case either. And any predictions about other long dead game modes like Survival of the Fittest or Primal Survival appearing eventually, they're all completely dead in the water as well. It's going to be all about building up towards ARK 2. And like I said, I think the devs will want to leave a nice big gap between content so that players are going to start getting excited for the next version and obviously start thinking about jumping over to it. You've been watching the trailer for it, of course it does star Vin Diesel. You guys might know that I didn't really like the look of him. His head just looks way too odd in this weird CGI trailer based in the Epic engine using in-game assets. Of course it does promote a lot of brand new things coming to the game, which I'm really excited for. NPC enemies, maybe factions, lots of new ways to tame. It does look like we're going to be more focused on gathering eggs rather than maybe just knocking them out. PvP will make a return. I had postulated that maybe it wouldn't be such a big focus, but they have confirmed that PvP will be part of the next sequel. Let's hope they can get a handle on the cheaters that once again have marred the experience for so many PvPers of ARK in 2020. Spoilers, it does look like whatever happens in the DLC for Gen 2, you're going to literally crash land on a planet, and this is the planet that you may end up becoming part of in the next ARK sequel. Hopefully this trailer is indicative of maybe more combat focused game and not just simply mashing one right-handed spear, and I'm excited to see what kind of different variants of creatures there are. But of course that's 2022, so we're jumping ahead a little bit too far right now, but I do think it really paints a picture that we are only going to see Gen 2 completion, maybe some more seasonal events, but that is pretty much it. I'll be very surprised if they announce a free map. Who knows though, if they do, maybe it'll be much later towards the end of summer, but I still think with this launching in March, I think it's going to be too short a gap. They've also got big teams working on different aspects. They still need to finish up Atlas, which has been struggling, so I fully expect them to actually divert a lot of attention towards that game just to get it done and dusted so it can start launching on the PlayStation 4. So yeah, Wildcard are going to be busy for the rest of this year. I really don't think they've got time to add too many more brand new features to ARK. And so that really leaves Conan and ARK going up against each other very, very soon with brand new expansions. Conan Exiles with the siptah DLC and a huge amount of changes that are going to be going into it, hopefully launching on Xbox and PlayStation as well. Going up pretty much at the same time as ARK Survival Evolved's Gen 2 DLC. It's going to be interesting to see which one manages to gain or take some players from the other. The Conan Exile devs have recently gone on record and said that they are making huge changes to siptah. They are introducing more bandit camps and actual NPC humanoids. They're going to be revamping quite a bit of the biomes and be adding a much more landmass to it. So it's going to be around 90% the size of the Conan Exiles lands. You will be able to transfer your character across from the Exiled lands over to the brand new DLC as well. And they're also going to be adding a brand new god as well as a new religion, so that's going to increase the amount of items, new weapons and armors that you can craft as well. That all sounds good, but I am a little bit dubious about how things have gone, how much that will pan out, and whether or not we're going to find lots of bugs and problems throughout the rest of the year. They've said they're going to release this on Xbox and PlayStation and then start updating it with some of that content as content features, effectively bringing early access to PlayStation even though they don't have a dedicated program, and just simply updating the game and labeling it as fresh patches or updates. There's no other plans or announcements for season passes of cosmetic skins and stuff like that, and very much like ARK and Wildcard, Funcom are starting to gear up for their next big project, which is going to be June. Now obviously we've got a release date of the movie coming very soon, that was delayed, and I fully expect to see some sort of teaser announcement this summer about when June releases. It is going to be a survival game based on the Frank Herbert novels, and I actually expect that to launch at some point in early 2022, again going up against ARK. So I'll be able to do these videos long, even if they are slightly different games in the future. Xbox and PlayStation fans of Conan, you'll be happy you're finally getting something new to try. You've gone the longest without any real content, and definitely they need to do better. There's still huge problems with the Xbox memory issue. This started in August when they introduced the last follow-up update, and since then loads of players have had problems on Xbox with the game crashing. Running out of memory is the main problem with that. Executive producer for Conan and Funcom has stated they're trying to fix it, but they've been doing that every single month with no avail. Their latest projection said they'd try and get it fixed at some point in January. It seems like there has been upheaval with Funcom over the last year or so. They've cut ties with one of their PR agencies they've worked with for years, and it does seem that communication from them has dwindled, with lots of staff maybe moving on to pastures new. So having some sort of smooth 2021 I don't think is on the cards for this. I think there's going to be significant kickback against the Isle of Siptah DLC when it does launch on console. I imagine players upset they've had to probably pay full price for the DLC when it's still so far from completion. With no seasonal events that they actually do, and not as many content patches whether it's server side or client, Conan and Funcom really have got to produce something special this year. I would like them to see if they can really devote more resources to siptah, get it done and dusted completely by March, and then actually have it come out on Xbox and PlayStation for everyone in a full finished state. They also seem to be going back over and over mechanics and systems, revamping them time and time again, with their latest one being the shield and stamina systems. Now again, these have all been for PC only. They won't be appearing on console, I guess, until the siptah DLC is done. But it also highlights another massive problem for them. The disparity between PC and console is huge now. When in 2019 I was praising them for getting their patches updates done at pretty much the same time, beating ARK easily each and every time. I literally gave them the kiss of death, because as soon as I did that video where I got a lot of flack for saying Conan was the better game, they immediately started going downhill. So to wrap it up, bottom line, if you're brand new to either of these games, you're looking for something to try, ARK will always have more content, more maps for you to explore, more things to do with so many creatures. Conan Exiles has got a little bit more RPG style, a little bit more attention to building and creating castles and making your own fun while exploring a limited map. When it comes to content that's coming, if you're looking to try some of this new stuff and which one you're going to put more time into, I would say ARK is actually going to offer the best bet as a fun, more cohesive experience. And ultimately, that's what I'll be most looking forward to trying out. I am more excited about playing Gen 2 than I will be the Isle of Siptah. And so on that basis, ARK is the better survival game to play in 2021. If you're an Xbox fan, it's a no-brainer trying it out on the Games Pass and all the early DLC for free. And of course, PC players will still be able to take advantage of the hundreds, thousands of mods that are available on ARK. That is one good plus point for Conan though. They have made some changes that enable it to input basically mods easier and quicker, and can take advantage of a lot more of the resources from the base game. So we should start seeing a little bit more choice and expanding of the mods in Conan. Also, do remember that ARK has double the amount of players that Conan Exiles does. At least, it is obviously still massively the more popular game, but I think they're both quite similar of the way you can tame, the way you can explore the maps, the survival elements, the base building and the raiding. It's all very similar. That's why I always put these two together. If you think I should do something different, let me know. Let me know what one you've enjoyed playing the most and what you most looking forward to playing in 2021. Until next time, Ratbags, I will see you later.